Thank you so much, Mr. Olmert. I could not agree more with just about everything you've said. The problem is you left me, you didn't give me another opportunity to argue with you about any of this.
Well, I apologize. That does happen sometimes.
That said, I want to pick up where you have left us with. In 2008 and 9, under your leadership, very serious negotiations took place between Israel and the Palestinians. And I believe you've said yourself that we have reached an agreement on nearly 90% of the conflicting issues. What was it that the last these 10% over which there was no agreement, and from your perspective, and why peace was not pursued from that point on?
Well, I don't really know to say, accurately that 90% was agreed and 10% was still left for further discussions. Maybe 98% was agreed and only 2% was left for. I think 100% was agreed. The issue was not any differences or any margins in the basic strategy or the basic plan. What I've proposed to the Palestinians is what they have been saying that they want for over 40 years at that time. It was 2008. In terms of the basis of the territorial solution, I talked about the 1967 borders as a basis with swaps of territories, as is accepted by the Palestinians, accepted by the international community. I said the basis will be 67. If we take some, we'll give some.
But that said, what was the specific conflicting issue?
There were no conflicting issues.
So why there was no agreement?
A lack of courage, I believe. A lack of confidence in the Palestinian side that if I will not be prime minister, that this same plan that was proposed by me will still prevail. I think so, but honestly, I think you have to ask the other side. This is the first time. I think I take pride because I take pride in this, not because I proposed something which was revolutionary. I proposed what everyone knew is what was the only plan possible to bring the two sides to the point where they can't disagree anymore. But the question was, and this was done by Israel. Israel did it. So everyone who comes to me and says, but you don't want peace, I said, excuse me. I proposed, and there is no disagreement about it, that I proposed this, and this. The ones that didn't give a positive answer was the Palestinian side. Now you ask me why? Go to Abu Mazen, invite him here. Maybe there will be more people coming, and he will have to give his answer. I can only say this. I proposed it. Abu Mazen himself said, had Olmert stayed another 3 months in power, there would have been peace between Israel and the Palestinians. It may have taken him more time to absorb it, more time to convince his own opposition, more time to move the process within the Palestinian community in order to accept it. I don't know. I can't answer for him. I know one thing, I've proposed it.
But are you then suggesting that the Israeli public would have accepted any kind of solution?
Of course.
You have proposed. Why do you say of course?
Look, when you come to the Israeli public and you tell them that this is dangerous and this is dangerous and this is a matter of existence and another thing is a matter of existence, people tend to believe to the leaders, particularly when they caution them about serious dangers that may destroy the existence of the state of Israel. And with Jewish history and with Jewish memories and with Jewish background, it is not so difficult.
But then again...
But I had a plan how to change this. This was part of the strategy, not just how to give it to Abu Mazen, but how to mobilize the entire world to join forces with us in order to convince the public opinion of Israel that this is the best solution for Israel. I am not, by the way, you may misunderstand, so I have to explain to you. I was the Prime Minister of Israel, and what I did was not in order to help Palestinians. I wanted to help Israel because I thought that it is important for Israel to have a peace treaty.
But let me just touch on an issue that I have been dealing now with for some time. There was one of the main impediments, in my view, was the public narrative that both Israel and the Palestinians have been engaged for decades. Now, you say that the Palestinians could not accept it because they could not really go to the public and say, we have agreed to this, we have given up on the issue of Palestinian refugees.
They haven't given up on anything.
Well then, why do you, or at least it's been said, that you thought that you were very close to reaching an agreement? What is it that they refuse to accept?
Look, the Palestinians said for 45 years that they want, to have the 67 borders. President Bush, in his famous letter on the 14th of April 2004, wrote to the Prime Minister of Israel that the final permanent agreement will be based on the 67 solutions, but not accurately the same line, which no one really knows to draw, but it will be based on the 67s with possible territorial swaps, considering the fact that there were demographic changes over the years, and the Jews live in some bulks of centers in the West Bank. So if these parts will remain under the sovereignty of Israel, equal-sized parts that were part of the state of Israel prior to 67 will be given to them. I proposed it, one-on-one. So this is one issue which we said to the Palestinians, not 90%, 100%, this is what you want. Number two, they said they want that the Arab part of Jerusalem will be under the sovereignty of the Palestinian state. I agreed. And you mentioned, the president mentioned before, I mean, he made a dramatic historical mistake, but I forgive him. He said that I was mayor from 1993 till 2000. No, I was a mayor from 1993 till 2003. So 3 years is a lot of time in Israeli politics. Jerusalem politics, very long time. But so I know something about Jerusalem, and I know something about the sensitivity of Jerusalem and the importance of Jerusalem. But believe me, I read all the history of Jerusalem. I read important books that were written by the most important researchers and archaeologists and historians that wrote about Jerusalem. I don't remember that anyone mentioned Jabal Mukaber as part of the history of the Jewish history of Jerusalem. Why do we need it?
Let me just go back.
No, this is important. Let me say, Professor Ben-Meir, let me just explain, because look, these guys, they don't know what you know. So they may not know certain things that you know, take for granted as obvious. In 1967, when Jerusalem was taken over by the State of Israel, there were two generals and one Israeli who was considered to be an expert about Jerusalem. They were sitting and they decided, okay, we're going to apply and annex Jerusalem into the State of Israel. Well, what is Jerusalem? How do you define the territorial part of Jerusalem which you want to annex to the State of Israel? They drew a map. This map has no connection to what we thought Jerusalem was in the first place when we, for 2,000 years, were praying for Jerusalem. You always can say, of course, the Western Wall is part of Jerusalem. For us, the Old City is part of Jerusalem in any way you look at it. But Jabal Mukaber, Abu Dis, Isawiya, Anata, Beit Hanina, they were not part of the city of Jerusalem. So I agree that all these parts will be given to the Palestinians with the 300,000 Arabs that live there, so that in 15 years there will not be more Arabs and Palestinians living in Jerusalem under the State of Israel as a Palestinian city, but rather that they will be part of the Palestinian Jerusalem and that it will become the Palestinian capital. As Arafat used to say, I want that Jerusalem of course, he meant, or whether he meant or not, I don't care, but this is what everyone understood, that this is the part of Jerusalem which is inhabited by Arabs, which is Jabal Mukaber and Israwiya and Abu Dis and Anata and the Beit Hanina and Shafat and all of these places, and Sheikh Jarrah and all these places. I agree with it, number two. Number three, I agreed that there will be no sovereignty over the Temple Mount. Not an Israeli sovereignty and not a Palestinian sovereignty. But that the holy basin of Jerusalem will be managed and controlled by, under the authorization of the United Nations, not just the Security Council, but the General Assembly of the United Nations. I was sure it will be given. It will be administered by 5 nations: America, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, the Palestinians, and Israel. In other words, Christians, Muslims, and Jews. And that there will be free access, of course, to all believers, and all the Jews will be able to go everywhere they want, and the Christians and the Muslims, and so on and so forth. The last thing was the Arab refugees. I agreed that a symbolic number. Now, of course, the question is, why do you have to establish a Palestinian state if you want all the Palestinians to come to the Jewish state? I mean, this is crazy. Of course, this idea of the right of return of Palestinians to original places where they lived was at a time when no one talked about a Palestinian state, but the whole idea of creating a Palestinian state was to establish for the Palestinians the place which will be their homeland. Now, I agreed for symbolic reasons that this issue will be resolved within the context of the Arab Peace Initiative. Everyone who said that Israel did not recognize the Arab Peace Initiative, I was the one who said it in Annapolis, in front of the President of the United States and the President of the Palestinian Authority and the foreign ministers of more than 14 Muslim nations. I said, we are prepared to negotiate this within the framework of the Arab Peace Initiative. And of course, there were security problems that were to be resolved between us and the Palestinians. So there was a response to every single sensitive issue that the Palestinians raised. Abu Mazen kept saying to me and kept sending messages to me all over until now, which I respect, don't say that I said no. And he's right. He never said no. The only problem is that he never said yes. And it's still there. He can pick it up. He can pick it up and come to us and say, this is what you guys proposed.
Let me just ask you then. You just said a few minutes ago, and rightfully so, that only the Israelis and the Palestinians can sit down and negotiate an agreement between them. That is, an outside power is not necessarily the right instrument for that. Now, what has changed from your perspective? If you maintain that a peace between Israel and the Palestinians is possible, what has changed on the part of the Palestinian to make it possible? Anything changed since the time you've been negotiating?
Number one, first of all, I'm not sure that the present government of Israel will support that which I proposed. So I can't speak for the government.
But what do you say?
I'm afraid that at the present time, I'm not in a position to speak for the Israeli government.
But no, I don't want you to speak on behalf.
Wait. No, so I don't know. No, you ask me. What about the Palestinians? And I can see that this blonde girl sitting right in front of me wants to ask, and what about the Israeli government? Do they agree to what you proposed? If they don't agree, then what the Palestinians supposed to say?
Okay, well, let's leave Netanyahu then aside.
I leave him.
Let's leave him aside. Now, suppose, wait a second. Suppose you are the Prime Minister today.
Yes.
Suppose you are the Prime Minister today.
Yes.
What sort of initiative would you take?
My initiative.
Let me then go back to the first question. Do you think that Mahmoud Abbas will be willing and able to sit down and negotiate under the terms you have just stipulated?
Yes, I think so. Number one, I think that Mahmoud Abbas today is stronger than ever before. Stronger than ever before, strangely enough. Why? Because of what happened in the Arab world, because of the decline of Syria, because the world is now tightening its squeeze over the Iranians, because the Hamas is now in direct confrontation with the Egyptian government, the like of which never happened before. Now the Egyptians are fighting Hamas and are killing Hamas because they understand that Hamas is a source of instability that has developed into a position which is against the interest of Egypt. So it has elevated the strengths, inner strengths, the domestic strengths of Abu Mazen. Therefore, he will be prepared to take more risks. That's one thing. Another thing, he needs to have, I'm not talking now about Israel because you told me not to talk about Israel. But he needs, from his point of view, he needs to have a leader in whom he has trust. Now, you have to ask him if he has trust in me. The problem is that when Bibi says, Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, says, I'm ready to negotiate without any preconditions, and in the next morning he announces that 5,000 more units will be built in the territories, the other side says, you either want to build 5,000 more units or you want to make peace. You can't do together the same thing. So that's the problem, the lack of trust. In my time, there was trust between me and the Palestinian leader, and when he comes here, as you promised, you'll ask him, and you will see that he says that there was trust.
But then again, let me just go back to, for a moment. You're talking about these differences, but let us assume for a moment that you are now sitting in front of Mahmoud Abbas, and you are saying that yes, Mahmoud Abbas will go along and because he's in a much, much stronger position. What about Hamas? Do you think that Mahmoud Abbas can strike a deal with Israel and ignore Hamas altogether? Is it possible?
It's possible. It's not easy. It's possible because if necessary, if Hamas will try to challenge this, then there are ways to deal with Hamas.
How would you deal with Hamas? And
I mean,
if any,
I can tell you, it will not be a very pleasant story, but I can tell you. I am against everyone who is the enemy of peace. I am against any terrorist. I am against anyone who says that he is not prepared to make peace. Look, Gaza, we pulled out entirely from Gaza. I mean, no one can today accuse Israel that we occupy 1 inch of territory from Gaza. Why do they shoot rockets on the cities outside of Gaza, which are part of the state of Israel, recognized by the entire international community? Now, if we will agree with the Palestinians that we also pull out from the West Bank under within a framework which will be accepted to both them and us on the basis of 67 borders, what argument will then remain for Hamas not to be for it? If they will try to oppose it in violent terms, then we will see who is stronger.
But this is not a question who is stronger. So suppose, yes, Hamas knows only too well that if they provoke the Israelis, they will be severely punished for any kind of provocation. But that isn't the issue. But they are perfectly capable of sabotaging any kind of an agreement between Israel and the Palestinian Authority.
Professor.
You know, what makes you think that they will not be able to sabotage such an agreement?
I think that they will try, and I think that the combination of A, an agreement, B, a cooperation between us and the Palestinian leadership, the Palestinian leadership which is recognized by the international community as the only one that can speak for the Palestinians. To this day, the only person who was elected in a democratic way by the majority of the Palestinians is one person, Mahmoud Abbas. If he makes an agreement, then there is this agreement, cooperation between Israel and a very significant part of the Palestinian community, and the support of the international community. The combination of these three elements will be stronger than any opposition that can attempt to jeopardize the agreement between Israel and Palestine.
And in the wake of what's happening in Syria, can you really talk about effective international community and international will? When people are being slaughtered day in and day out, I mean, do you really have a trust in the international community or the United Nations Security Council to lift a finger?
No, I don't, no, when I say no, I don't say that I don't have trust in some of those forces, and certainly I have trust in many of them, but that's not the issue. The issue in Syria is different, and we all know that the fact that there was no intervention is because one superpower, or more than one superpower, was protecting the Syrian government, and this was the Russians, perhaps together with the Chinese. This is not the case in the West Bank and in Gaza. There is no superpower. There is only one superpower in this area, and this is the state of Israel. What we lacked in the past when we tried to protect the occupation was a lack of international support. When we will then help the Palestinians to exercise their rights against the rebels from within the Palestinians that are against democracy, against peace, and so on, it will be supported by the entire international community, and we don't need any outside force to intervene. We can do it ourselves.
Okay, let's leave Hamas for a moment, and let's go back to the
I want to leave them forever.
So let's go back to the current situation. Do you believe that the given time that the United States suggested, 9 months, that Israelis and Palestinians, under the leadership of Netanyahu, what is the prospect of reaching an agreement under these conditions?
Well, if they will accept, both sides will accept this line of thinking that I've elaborated on here, then there is a good chance to do it within less than 9 months. If they will not, then it will not succeed.
But we know that Netanyahu is not in that, does not think in those terms.
Well, I can remember myself in 25 years ago that I was myself in a different position. I changed. So you must always believe in the spirit of people, that it can change them when the ultimate responsibility lies on their shoulders. I hope that when Bibi will understand that the alternative for making peace is to perhaps engage in a new intifada that will cost lots of blood for us and for the Palestinians, that he may change his position. I know that he is not in favor of my thinking, and I know that he has opposed it in every possible way that he could, and I think he made a mistake. But at that time he was in the opposition, and I was in government. Now he is himself in government, and he will have to bear the ultimate responsibility, and I hope that when he will realize it, and he will be faced with the possible ramifications of additional confrontation, bloodshed confrontation, that maybe he will change his opinion.
Do you really think...
If not, maybe we will have to change the government.
Do you really think that's going to happen? He's been now 3 times prime minister. He has not changed his mind one single iota. An ideologue like Netanyahu simply ignore the reality on the ground. We know that. He is, just as much as a religious person who does not need evidence to be proven right or wrong. This is what we have today. You have a prime minister who is not committed to peace, albeit he talks about two-state solution, and every action he takes day in and day out are totally inconsistent with the concept of two-state solution. Do you think that he's going to wake one morning and get the lucidity and begin to think, well, time has come?
Look,
what is going to take to change the dynamics in Israel today?
Professor, the last thing that I thought will happen when I appear in Washington, not so far from the White House, in the branch of the New York University, is that I'll be asked to defend Bibi Netanyahu. I could think of many scenarios. This was not part of my original plan. And I'm sorry if I will not be able to give you an answer that will satisfy you and that will be accepted by him, how he will change. I hope that he will change. But in democracy and in many countries, including Israel, it's a day in and there is a day out in a different way.
This is
true. He can be in and he can be out if the people of Israel will believe that there is a genuine chance for peace and that it can be achieved without the rhetoric of disaster which characterized this argument whenever we discuss it in the State of Israel, then they will support it. And I have no doubt in my mind that it can be, the majority of the public opinion can be mobilized to support it. And even at the cost of losing the great leadership of the present time for another.
Netanyahu has nearly 3 more years to go if he may well be able to hold his coalition government together. Do you think that if things do not change in a dramatic way, that the Israeli-Palestinian situation is sustainable? You just mentioned yourself that the likelihood of a third intifada. How much time do we have until such eruption might take place? Suppose he stays in power for the next 3 years.
I'm not afraid that much of the another eruption. This is just an example that I gave. I'm very much afraid, perhaps even more, that the perception of Israel in the international community will be of a country which denies millions of people the fundamental human rights and political rights which they deserve to have, which was the source of what Jews were fighting for all their history. And if that will be the case, then the price that we will be asked to pay will be beyond the ability of Israel to take.
Who is mobilizing the international, the Israeli public? 2 years ago, there were 400,000 Israelis went out demanding better housing, affordable housing, more jobs, more opportunity. But not once there was Israeli demonstration demanding a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In my view, the Israeli public remained complacent at best. And I don't see any movement in Israel today demanding time has come for change. What makes you think that's going to come tomorrow or next? Who's going to mobilize this public opinion?
First of all, I want to remind you that there were many demonstrations in Israel, both pro-agreement and against agreement. And that if you will say it, had your guest been one of the leaders of Peace Now movement, you would have been very insulted for you ignoring entirely how many tens of thousands of people they mobilized in Israel against governments which they thought were not sufficiently in favor of promoting a peace between us and the Arabs. So there were many demonstrations. Today it's quiet because there is no terror, and it's true that when there is no terror and there are other issues, people tend to focus on what bothers them at the present time, which is not necessarily the Palestinian issue. But I think that the possible reaction of the international community that I've outlined already before, with the possibility of the eruption of terrorist actions in various parts, can change overnight the attitude of many of the Israelis, and can change overnight the stability of the political system. And I personally think that this is something that is likely to happen sooner than later.
But I have to disagree with you in this regard. I really do, because you
insist on being wrong. I mean,
no. I do follow the Israeli scene very, very carefully. Yes. You go randomly take 10, 15 Israelis from the street and ask them, do you trust the Palestinian? I bet you 9 out of 10 will tell you, no, we don't trust the Palestinian. Now you're talking about an entirely different perception, and I maintain that you cannot change that perception unless there is massive, major change in the public narrative by the government, by the various think tanks, by the universities, in school, and that is not taking place, not in Israel and not among the Palestinians. And that is, in my view, the biggest impediment to peace. People are not prepared. How could you possibly, under your tenure, you agreed about Jerusalem, and I think that is admirable. You hear what Netanyahu is saying today? For how much longer you think, the Israelis do not expect ever Jerusalem to become a capital of 2 states. The Palestinians still sing the same song and dance about the right of return. the dynamics have changed since when you were prime minister, and it's getting worse by the day. Now, I don't believe that you can change that overnight, as you said. Something else is going to have to happen. You need to come back.
I knew from the beginning.
Am I not right?
A long question that lasts almost like a speech must end up with some dramatic, idea. And I was suspecting that he leads to it. So I'll tell you what. It's a great idea, by the way.
To give him a big hand, huh?
It's a great idea, but I'll tell you what. I'm in the Prime Minister's office. There is a section of the budget which is dedicated for opinion polls. For 3.5 years now, my predecessor and certainly the ones before him used all that budget and asked for more. The present Prime Minister, who was already a Prime Minister before, of course, uses this budget and more. I never made one opinion poll when I was Prime Minister trying to find out what the opinion is, because I tried to follow what Mr. Ben-Gurion used to say. With all the, I'm not trying to compare myself to Ben-Gurion, who was the greatest Jew perhaps since Moshe Rabbeinu.
Since Moses.
Moses, yes. These guys, you tell them Moshe Rabbeinu, believe me, they know who he is. I'll tell you what. Ben-Gurion said, I don't ask what the people want. I tell them what they need. And leadership is precisely this. You don't go to the street and ask people, 15 people, what do you think? Do you trust them? You don't trust them? And so on. You tell them what they need, and you use the power of your leadership and the power of your position in order to impose it. And then you go to elections. And I'll tell you something. I am absolutely confident. I have no doubt in my mind that I brought an agreement with the Palestinians in lines of what I said for an election. I had a whole plan how to do it, how to build up a momentum, in the public opinion, not just of Israel, of the Palestinians, of the international community, and so on and so forth. I knew exactly what needed to be done. And I done it. And I would have declared this is the agreement. It was approved by the UN Security Council on condition, of course, that it would be approved by the two states. And it was voted favorably by the General Assembly of the United Nations, by joint session of Congress, by the European Parliament, and the whole leaders of the world would have come to Jerusalem to declare together with the leaders of the State of Israel and of the proposed Palestinian state, this is peace, we all for peace, we all will support it, and so on and so forth. 70% of the Israelis would have supported it, including all these 15 guys that you asked them in the street whether they trust the Palestinians or not.
Well, believe me. But you and I think agree that there is crisis of leadership today in Israel. Do you agree to that proposition?
There is certainly a crisis in the Labour Party.
Well, that's beside the point. The Labour Party did not really enjoy.
What do you want me to say? That I'm against the Prime Minister of Israel?
No,
I wouldn't say.
But
because that will be unfair. What I can say is this, that we have different ideas about how things should be run.
Okay, but
and naturally I think that my ideas are better.
But other than yourself, that hopefully you will come back and lead the country, do you see today any emerging leader in Israel? Really? I mean, do you see a person, a personality, someone? Can you name someone?
Look, a year ago, a young man who is a very good friend of mine, who was the most popular television anchor in Israel, retired, and the next day he said he will run for the next elections, and he became the second largest party in Israel. His name is Yair Lapid. He's a brilliant guy. He's a decent man. He's a man with natural abilities that were manifested in the way that he has worked it out from nowhere into becoming the second largest party in the state of Israel. So this is one person who one day, I don't know when this day will come, but in principle one day can be.
And do you really believe that Lapid has made thus far any contribution to the peace process?
Not yet, but he's not in charge of it.
Well, he's not in charge,
but this has been given almost exclusively to Miss Livni.
Well, and you really believe that Netanyahu trusts Livni to conduct the negotiation, or this is just a facade?
I like better your earlier questions.
I mean, no, but honestly, I mean, do you really think that Netanyahu gave Livni the mandate to negotiate in earnest?
I don't know. I don't know. I can't judge it by, the intimacy of the relations, which I'm not familiar with. I can judge it by the outcome.
But then again,
if I look at the outcome is that whether she was given or she was not given, I don't know. The outcome is not there.
But then
that I know.
You talk just about Lapid.
Yeah.
And the negotiation currently between the Israelis and the Palestinians is in a crisis. There's very little progress was made. And he's part of the coalition, and he has yet to say one word about what's going on. Is this the kind of leader you really think is going to lead Israel to and make peace between Israel and the Palestinians?
Look, wait and see whether he talks and what he will say.
When will he talk? When will he talk?
What do you want from me?
No, only because
I can't speak
his
for
name.
Netanyahu. I can't speak for... No, I said something which is objectively significant. The guy was a television anchor, and overnight, within a very short period of time, for the first time that he ran, he became the second largest party in the state of Israel. This is a very, very significant achievement which must be recognized and, I think, admired. And you have to give him the credit. Now, whether or not he does what needs to be done in his capacity at the present time, he's being Minister of Finance, to support the peace process in a certain direction or not, is a different question. I prefer that you will invite him also. I can give you a good program for the entire year of whom you should invite to ask him the questions which I'm not in a position to answer. But I can tell you this. For me, the most important issue is this issue. I think it should be resolved. I think it can be resolved. I think it requires courage, leadership, inspiration, and perseverance by the leaders who are in a position to do it. The fact is that it's not done.
Well, it's not done.
It needs to be done.
It's not done, and we don't see anyone today in Israel is in a position to deliver on any of these things. What's going to happen? For how much longer you think? And I want to go back to what you stated, and it's absolutely correct. There was the Arab Spring. People are dying by the tens of thousands, be that in Syria and elsewhere. And the Palestinians have been occupied for more than 40 years. For how much longer they will wait? I mean, this is a legitimate question. And now when you look at the Israeli political scene, you don't see one single leader who is saying a time has come. They talk the good talk, they walk the but they...
Well, the fact remains is that there was a leader who said the time has come and he has proposed something and the Palestinians did not respond. So
but
that
was
ignore.
That was 7 years ago.
It was 5 years ago. You can't ignore it. Pardon?
When you were there.
Yes, okay, but you can't ignore it. No, you say how much longer will they wait? So first of all, they were given an opportunity and they didn't turn it down. They didn't respond, as I said. They should have responded. I hope, I believe, I think that it can be done. I think that there will be leadership that will do it. I think that the public opinion of Israel will come along. I think that the Palestinians will understand it. Don't ask me more because I'm not going to be more explicit about it for obvious reasons.
But when?
Soon.
When?
Soon.
Well, and I can only hope. You know, the truth of the matter, there is nothing you said that I disagree with. I just wanted to give you a little hard time. I mean, that's the nature of
I
it.
hope I didn't give you a hard time. Listen, no. I'm always prepared to accept a professorship in the NYU, but not in Washington, because I want to do it in New York.
I am from New York.
You are from New
yes,
York also.
Yeah,
Okay, so you tell your guys that I'm ready to accept it. I'm ready to accept it.
I want to invite you to come to New York anytime.
All right.
And perhaps you give us a lecture in my class.
All right.
Is that the deal?
Well, I don't know if you are rich enough to be able to sponsor it, but I'll always be happy to speak for in the University of New York. I think I mentioned that one of my children is and my daughter-in-law are both graduates of Tisch School of Arts, master degree in the New York University, so I have a certain, it's a soft point for me. And I will always remember how many hours the ceremony took when Dustin Hoffman was telling all the history of his life, and he was at that time already close to 70, and it took him quite a while to describe, and I was missing my flight, but I stayed because my son was one of the graduates, so I have a special affection for New York University, and if, you'll invite me.
One short final question, then I want to turn to the audience for a few questions. Obviously, John Kerry, the Secretary of State, is extremely frustrated with the lack of progress being made. Now, suppose you meet him tomorrow. What kind of advice would you give him?
Believe me, I'll give him a good advice.
What is it? What is it? No, seriously. Can you share with us something about what you would tell him privately?
Look, you heard from me basically what my position is.
Would you tell him that?
Now, do you think that he needs to meet me in order to know what my position is? First of all, we are good friends. So he knows what I think, and while I was Prime Minister and after I was Prime Minister, I met with him many times, and I really have a very high opinion of John Kerry and his wife. Both are wonderful people. Now, if John Kerry will want to meet with me, he knows how to reach me, and I will not say anything that I'm going to tell him, because I think it's inappropriate. And it has become part of the way that people handle themselves, which I think is wrong. If you want to give an advice to an incumbent while he is in the middle of a very, very powerful, energetic, and courageous effort to bring peace to the two sides, you don't announce it through the microphones and through the papers. You can talk to him and tell him privately what you think, and believe me, this is a much more useful manner to do it.
I agree, but do you think it was wise on his part to say publicly that if there is no progress, there will be a third intifada? Should that be the signal that he should be sending to the Palestinians?
I don't think that this is a signal that he sent to the Palestinians. I think that this is the signal that he got from the Palestinians that he wanted to send to the Israelis.
But the question,
my understanding.
Do you think this was a wise thing to do so publicly?
Listen, you must understand that the Secretary of State is committed to achieve peace, and is using every possible manner, every possible way in which he can influence the sides. I'm not his advocate. I'm not his.
But do you think that would really help him with Netanyahu?
We'll see. We'll see.
We're going to leave it at we'll see, but I'm not going to let you off the hook next time around.